Welcome back to WWE Frenzy, where we bring you the most explosive stories from inside the squared circle. Before we dive into today's chaos, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell because trust me, you're going to want to be here for every single upload after hearing this one. Now, let me tell you something that's been brewing behind the curtain that has fans absolutely divided and the wrestling community in complete pandemonium. CM Punk might be sitting out the Royal Rumble, and the reasons behind this potential boycott are sending shockwaves through the entire WWE universe. While everyone's been focused on dream matches and surprise entrants, there's a story unfolding that exposes some serious problems with how talent gets treated in this company. I've been covering wrestling for years, and I've seen a lot of backstage politics, but this situation has layers that go deeper than anyone realizes. The man who walked back into WWE after nearly a decade away, who supposedly buried the hatchet with Triple H, who gave us those incredible moments that had fans crying tears of joy, might be ready to walk away from one of the biggest shows of the year because he's being disrespected in ways that would make any professional reconsider their position. Here's where things get interesting, and believe me when I say this is going to make you question everything you thought you knew about how WWE operates in 2025. Punk's complaints aren't just about creative direction or screen time. Multiple sources close to the situation have indicated that the issues run much deeper, touching on promises that were allegedly made when he signed his contract and how those promises have been systematically broken over the past several months. Remember when Punk came back at Survivor Series in Chicago? That moment felt like WWE was finally doing right by him, giving him the hero's return he deserved in his hometown. The place erupted, grown men were sobbing, and it seemed like all the AEW drama was firmly in the rearview mirror. Fast forward to now, and we're hearing whispers that the second best in the world is feeling like he's being treated as anything but. Let me paint you a picture of what's allegedly been happening. When Punk returned, there were discussions about his role moving forward, about how he'd be positioned as a main event talent, about giving him meaningful feuds with top guys. Initially, everything seemed to align with those conversations. He worked with Seth Rollins in a program that delivered incredible matches and compelling television. The storytelling was crisp, the matches were brutal, and fans were invested. But somewhere along the line, things started shifting. Creative meetings became tense. Ideas that Punk pitched were getting shot down without proper explanation. Finishes to matches were being changed at the last minute in ways that didn't benefit anyone involved. And perhaps most frustratingly, opportunities that seemed tailor-made for someone of his caliber were being given to other performers who, let's be honest, haven't proven they can carry that weight. Now I know some of you are probably thinking this sounds like typical wrestler ego, someone complaining because they're not getting pushed to the moon. But here's the thing that separates this from generic locker room grumbling. Punk isn't asking to be handed everything. Throughout his entire career, the guy has been willing to work his way up, to put in the effort, to make other people look good when it serves the story. During his first WWE run, he elevated guys, he worked programs that helped build the next generation, and he did it while cutting promos that are still being quoted today. When he went to AEW, despite all the controversy and the way things imploded, he was trying to help build the company into something legitimate. Love him or hate him, you can't deny that Punk has always been about the wrestling business first, even when his methods have been questionable. The Royal Rumble situation specifically is where things have apparently reached a breaking point. According to reports filtering out through various wrestling journalists who have legitimate connections, Punk was told he'd have a significant role in this year's Rumble. Now, whether that meant a lengthy run in the match, a surprise spot, or even a potential win was never explicitly stated, but the implication was clear that he wouldn't be treated as just another body. Then, as the event drew closer, the plans started changing. Suddenly there were discussions about an early elimination. Then talks about whether he should even be in the match at all. Then, most insultingly, suggestions that maybe he should be used to put over someone newer who needs the rub, despite the fact that Punk himself could benefit from a strong Rumble showing to build toward WrestleMania. I remember interviewing a former WWE writer a couple years back, and they told me something that stuck with me. They said the biggest problem with how WWE operates isn't that they don't have talented people or good ideas, it's that there's no consistency in decision-making. One week you're being groomed for a championship run, the next week you're losing to someone on the midcard in under 10 minutes because someone upstairs changed their mind overnight. That kind of environment breeds frustration, especially for someone like Punk who's at a stage in his career where every moment matters. He's not a 25-year-old kid who has a decade to recover from bad booking. Every poorly executed angle, every meaningless loss, every wasted opportunity is time he'll never get back. The treatment Punk's allegedly receiving becomes even more frustrating when you look at the broader picture of WWE's current landscape. They're making record profits, the TV deals are massive, the Saudi shows are bringing in incredible money, and yet there seems to be this persistent issue with keeping top talent happy. Look at the list of people who've left or wanted to leave over the past few years. Look at the number of wrestlers who've spoken out after their departures about feeling undervalued or misused. There's a pattern here that can't be ignored, and Punk's situation is just the latest example of a company that sometimes seems more interested in proving they're in control than in creating the best possible product. What makes this whole mess even more complicated is the history between Punk and WWE. When he left in 2014, the bridges weren't just burned, they were nuked from orbit. The lawsuit with the company doctor, the bitter interviews, the pipe bomb references that became part of wrestling lore, all of it pointed to a relationship that was irreparably damaged. So when the reconciliation happened, when Punk came back, it was supposed to represent growth on both sides. WWE was supposed to have learned from past mistakes, to have evolved into a company that values its performers differently. Punk was supposed to be more mature, more willing to work within the system. And for a while, it looked like both parties were holding up their end of that unspoken agreement. But here's where my cynicism kicks in, and maybe you'll disagree with me in the comments, but I think WWE never really changed their fundamental approach. They just got better at the PR, better at the optics, better at making it seem like things were different. Behind the scenes, it's still the same power dynamics, the same last-minute changes, the same disregard for long-term storytelling in favor of whatever whim strikes at that particular moment. Punk coming back was great for business, it popped ratings, it sold merchandise, it gave them a nostalgia hit that translated into dollars. But now that the initial buzz is worn off, now that he's just another guy on the roster instead of a returning legend, the old patterns are reasserting themselves. I've got to share something personal here because it relates to why this story frustrates me so much. Years ago, I was working in a completely different industry, and I took a job with a company that promised me creative freedom, opportunities for advancement, and a voice in decision-making. For the first 6 months, everything was incredible. My ideas were being implemented, I was getting positive feedback, and I felt valued. Then slowly, things started to shift. New management came in with different priorities. The promises that were made during my hiring process suddenly became flexible suggestions rather than commitments. By the time I left that job, I was miserable, not because the work itself was bad, but because the constant disrespect and broken promises had drained all the passion I once had. When I hear about Punk's situation, I see echoes of that experience, and it makes me genuinely angry on his behalf. The Royal Rumble is supposed to be one of the most exciting events in wrestling. It's where careers can be made, where momentum can shift, where the road to WrestleMania truly begins. For Punk to potentially sit it out, to boycott an event that important, sends a message that goes beyond one man's grievances. It tells the entire roster that there are limits to what they should tolerate. It tells fans that sometimes the behind-the-scenes reality doesn't match the carefully crafted image WWE presents. And most importantly, it forces a conversation about whether WWE's current success has made them complacent about how they treat the people who actually perform in that ring. The timing of all this makes it even more significant. We're in an era where wrestlers have more options than ever before. AEW exists as a legitimate alternative, even if it has its own problems. Japan is always looking for talent. The independent scene is thriving. WWE can no longer operate under the assumption that performers will accept anything because there's nowhere else to go. The power dynamic has shifted, and situations like Punk's boycott are symptoms of that larger change in the industry. Wrestlers are realizing they have leverage, they have value, and they don't have to accept being treated as interchangeable parts in someone else's machine. Now let's talk about the specific claims of unfair treatment because they're not happening in a vacuum. There are reports that Punk has been vocal in meetings about wanting to work with certain people, wanting to tell certain stories, and those requests are being denied without adequate explanation. Meanwhile, other performers are getting opportunities to pitch their own ideas and having those ideas greenlit. There's an inconsistency in how creative input is valued depending on who it's coming from, and that kind of arbitrary decision-making creates a toxic environment. When one wrestler sees their carefully thought-out pitch rejected while watching someone else get approval for something half-baked, it breeds resentment and kills morale. Beyond the creative frustrations, there are whispers about how Punk is being promoted compared to other top stars. When you look at the marketing materials, the video packages, the social media push, there seems to be a hierarchy that doesn't necessarily reflect in-ring ability or fan popularity. It reflects backstage politics and who's in favor at any given moment. Punk, despite being one of the most recognizable names in the industry, isn't getting the promotional support that his status would suggest he deserves. That might seem like a small thing to people outside the business, but in an industry where perception often becomes reality, those details matter enormously. I want to address something that I know is going to come up in the comments because it always does when we talk about Punk. Yes, he has a reputation for being difficult. Yes, there's the AEW situation that ended in disaster. Yes, he's been involved in backstage conflicts throughout his career. None of that is in dispute. But here's the question we need to ask ourselves: does having a difficult reputation mean someone deserves to be treated unfairly? Does past conflict justify breaking current promises? I'd argue it doesn't. Every situation should be evaluated on its own merits, and if WWE made commitments to Punk when they brought him back, they have an obligation to honor those commitments regardless of his history. The fan reaction to news of this potential boycott has been predictably divided. Some people are firmly in Punk's corner, arguing that he's standing up for himself against a system that chews up and spits out performers. Others think he's being entitled, that he should be grateful for the opportunity to be back in WWE at all. Both perspectives have merit, but they're also missing the larger point. This isn't really about one man's career or one company's booking decisions. This is about the fundamental relationship between a corporation and the talent that generates revenue for that corporation. It's about whether wrestlers are partners in creating a product or simply employees expected to execute someone else's vision without question. When I think about the greatest moments in wrestling history, they almost always involve performers who had significant creative input. Stone Cold Steve Austin crafted much of his own character. The Rock developed his persona through trial and error and personal creativity. Mick Foley's greatest moments came when he was allowed to be authentic rather than playing a role someone else wrote for him. Punk himself had his career-defining runs when he was given freedom to be himself amplified. The best wrestling happens when there's collaboration, when talented performers are trusted to contribute their ideas and expertise. The worst wrestling happens when micromanagement and corporate thinking override what works in the ring and with audiences. The Royal Rumble boycott, if it happens, won't be the first time Punk has taken a stand. It probably won't be the last time a wrestler pushes back against WWE's system, but it could be a watershed moment that changes how these conversations happen going forward. If a performer of Punk's caliber can successfully advocate for better treatment, it might embolden others to do the same. It might force WWE to examine their practices and make meaningful changes. Or it could result in nothing changing at all, with Punk either falling in line or being phased out, serving as a warning to anyone else who might consider rocking the boat. What frustrates me most about this entire situation is the wasted potential. WWE has one of the most talented rosters in wrestling history. They have incredible performers who could be having classic matches and telling compelling stories every single week. Instead, we get inconsistent booking, dropped storylines, and talented people sitting in catering because there's nothing for them to do. Punk should be in the middle of an epic program heading into WrestleMania. He should be working with the best opponents, cutting the promos that made him famous, and reminding everyone why he's one of the greatest of all time. Instead, we're talking about whether he's going to boycott the Royal Rumble because he's being treated like he doesn't matter. I've been running this channel for a while now, and one thing I've learned is that the WWE Universe is passionate about this business. You care about the performers, you care about the stories, and you can tell when something isn't right. The response to rumors about Punk's situation has been overwhelming, with thousands of you reaching out, commenting, and sharing your thoughts. That engagement proves that this matters, that how wrestlers are treated isn't just inside baseball, it's something fans genuinely care about. WWE would be wise to pay attention to that sentiment instead of dismissing it as internet speculation. Looking ahead, there are several ways this could play out. Punk could negotiate a resolution, finding some middle ground where his concerns are addressed and he participates in the Rumble after all. WWE could dig in their heels, refusing to budge, and daring Punk to follow through with the boycott. Punk could walk away entirely, leaving WWE for the second time and burning whatever bridges might have been rebuilt. Or, and this might be the most likely outcome, everything could blow over, business could continue as usual, and we'll be talking about some other controversy next week because that's how the wrestling news cycle works. But even if this specific situation resolves itself, the underlying issues remain. WWE has a problem with how they manage talent relationships. They have a problem with consistency in their decision-making. They have a problem with honoring commitments and treating performers as valued partners rather than disposable assets. Until those fundamental problems are addressed, we're going to keep seeing situations like this arise. Different names, different circumstances, but the same basic pattern of frustration and conflict. CM Punk boycotting the Royal Rumble would be a massive story, one that transcends wrestling and becomes mainstream news. It would force conversations that WWE probably doesn't want to have publicly. It would put pressure on the company to explain their side, to justify their decisions, to defend their treatment of one of the industry's biggest stars. Whether that pressure results in actual change or just better PR spin remains to be seen, but the attention itself would be significant. As I wrap this up, I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think Punk is justified in potentially boycotting the Rumble? Should WWE be doing more to accommodate their top talent? Is this whole thing overblown, or are we seeing a legitimate problem that needs to be addressed? Your perspective matters, and the discussions we have here on WWE Frenzy are part of what makes this community special. Make sure you're subscribed because we'll be following this story as it develops, and trust me, there's going to be more to talk about. Hit that like button if you found this breakdown valuable, and share this video with anyone who needs to understand what's really happening behind the curtain. The wrestling business is messy, complicated, and often frustrating, but it's also endlessly fascinating, and I wouldn't want to cover anything else. Thanks for watching WWE Frenzy, and I'll see you in the next one where we'll continue exposing the truth that others won't talk